You will never find an image of Yeshua Messiah in my house. Why? Because it's a graven image. Elohim is the invisible God, and he chooses to manifest himself to humans in distinct ways. So he doesn't want us crafting images of what he looks like. He wants to show us himself what he looks like. So I've understood certain Tanakh concepts since I've been about 5 years old, and I questioned growing up in my scholastic years why Jewish people simply refuted or rejected Yeshua Messiah, and came to an understanding that a big part of it is the antinomianism that is present within the church. The second reason is that they understand our Elohim as being a war Elohim. And this is why you look at Rabbi Akiva believing that Shimon bar Kosiva was the Messiah because he led a Jewish rebellion against Roman rule in the 2nd century. As an 18-year-old engaged in deep Torah study, I looked at Numbers chapter 24 and verse 17 and saw that it was about the Messiah. It says, I see him, but not now. I look at him, but not near. A star shall appear from Yaakov, and a scepter shall arise from Israel, and smash the forehead of Moab, and overcome the sons of Sheth. What this means is that the Gentile nations that refuse to worship Yahweh will be utterly destroyed. And this is what our brethren were expecting. And this is a reasonable expectation. But will he destroy all the Gentiles? No. There will be survivors from among the nations who will be made to go and worship Elohim 3 times out of the year, according to Tanakh. And let's explore this subject further. So in Malachim, Aleph, we're going to go to chapter 18 and verse 32. This is talking about Eliyahu or Elijah the prophet. It says, with stones he built an altar in the name of Yahweh, and he dug a trench around it large enough to hold 2 seahs of seed. This represents the 2 houses of Israel coming back to a proper worship of our Father sometime in the future. Now, there was an immediate fulfillment to this, but there will arguably be a dual fulfillment. In the Brit Hadashah, we see Yeshua explaining what the kingdom will look like. He says, it is like leaven, which a woman took and hid in 3 measures of meal. So that is representative or symbolic of 3 types of people. So there will be a people from outside of Israel that is mixed in with this batch of people who will be present in the kingdom till the whole was leavened. So we need to not become Hellenized as much as possible. Our Reform brothers and sisters, unfortunately, believe that their houses of worship are equivalent to the temple in Jerusalem, but given their disobedience to Torah and Tanakh, they don't treat their bodies as such. And we see that the ministry of the apostles in the book of Acts extends a lot to the Reformed Jews. When you see any references to Hellenists in the book of Acts, it is likely talking about a Reformed type of a Jew or a group of them. And these are the kinds of people that Yahweh Elohim is trying to work hard at bringing back in. So with our Reform, quote-unquote, brethren, so to speak, not so brethren, there's this idea that there will not be a national political restoration of Israel under a messianic king with the temple rebuilt and the sacrificial service reinstituted, which is a complete contradiction with what we see written in the Tanakh. When you see the book of Revelation and you understand the symbolism that comes from the law and the prophets in that book, you get a much better understanding of that book. Some say that the earthquake in Ezekiel chapter 37 is one of the earthquakes that is presented in the book of Revelation. This narrative would actually connect because Yahweh comes down on his throne, and I'm talking specifically about the Father, with the New Jerusalem after the final war between him and Satan and his camp, or Hasatan, also known as the adversary. Well, in Ezekiel chapter 38 and verse 23, we read, "Thus will I manifest my greatness and my holiness, and make myself known in the sight of many nations, and they shall know that I am God. In the Hebrew, we read, Le'ene goyim rabim weyado ki ani Yahweh. In other words, even though in Torah it is written that man shall not see God's face and live, we see that in the kingdom, man shall indeed see God's face in its full manifestation and yet live. Because what did the Messiah Yeshua say? That when the new heaven and new earth come, that the law and the prophets will be abolished. Meaning that that specific passage won't be applicable to people in resurrected bodies who are permitted to enter the kingdom according to the standards of John chapter 3. We also see that according to Yeshayahu or Isaiah, that the sun, moon, and stars, the celestial bodies, will not be the ones giving light for the renewed heaven and earth, but rather Yahweh the King manifest in physical form. We will see him, and yet we will not pass away from this. Just remember that Rav Ovadiah rescinded a letter for peace when Israel was having trouble with some of the Palestinians, but the reality is that kind of calamity is something that we're no longer going to have to go through when we enter the kingdom age. Our brethren will say the Birkat Kohanim, the blessing for the priests, when they go to the Western Wall. And many believe that this is a remnant of the former temple that once stood. But our Messiah Yeshua said that not one stone shall be left upon another. And there's plenty of evidence to suggest that this wall actually belonged to a Roman fort that was constructed after Yeshua's time. But the good news is that they're at least reciting the Birkat Kohanim and not the Birkat Haminim, the curse, the not so blessing, they call it a blessing, but the not so blessing against the sectarians, such as myself. So you have a lot of prayers that are said at the Western Wall. Sometimes prayer notes are slipped through the cracks, or you might have a rote prayer like the Amidah that's recited. It's recited in synagogue. I want to go over that in another video and what Yahweh actually thinks about rote prayers. What I have to say, though, for now is may our prayers come from our hearts. May we pray that our flight not be in the winter or on the Shabbat. Brutal times to have to leave. Maybe your car's out of gas, or maybe your means of transportation is not working and you're going to be pursued on foot sometime in the future. Because the reality is we will be hated for our faith in Yeshua. He said it himself. The prophets were hated and killed. Yeshua was hated and killed. His first disciples, the sectarians, they kept the original faith of believing in Tanakh and doing the things of Tanakh and in Messiah. They were killed for their witness to the nations. And the fact that we think that we're any different, that we can somehow just escape all of this. We're very selfish to have those thoughts. And I hope that as I leave you with those words, I want to give you a word of encouragement to continue in the faith, to continue in your prayers, and to believe that our God will protect you and that he will provide for you. And he'll provide for you the means to live as long as you're breathing, or he may provide you with death. But the blessing when you come out of the grave, when you come out of Sheol, will be so magnificent. Shalom.